All right, we're live and on the internet. How are y'all tonight?
Pretty well.
I'm good. No complaints.
I'm good. I'm just a little tired because Spence was there for this,
Mm-hmm.
but we got the backdrop and the main lighting rig set up and built so it can be broken down and put back up for Extra Life. So that's that. That was fun.
Awesome.
Oh yeah.
So we are back. We are continuing on with this is the spooky time of season, and I think that we're going to talk about folklore tonight, right? I think that's the subject we got.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
So I guess before we just jump into folks telling folklore tales, what are the elements of a good spooky folklore tale? Y'all are both writers, so let's kind of jump into that. What are like some elements that need to be there? You think?
Well, it needs to have a little bit of truth to it. You know, like the best tales have a little bit of truth to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think they also have to play on a fear that also already exists within the main zeitgeist of the area.
Oh, definitely.
I
You know,
mean,
you
yeah,
gotta.
100%. I mean, if we can just think back to like the days of watching Hey Arnold, and then that like one of the characters that did an amazing job with all of these folk tales and stuff. But for me, a folk tale kind of has to have that bit of like uncanniness, and that the fact of that, you know, especially that if that it is done very well, and then it basically it basically creates a juxtaposition of just your audience's expectation of if something that really wasn't it, but actually it was it at the reveal at the end of just a good story. And also, I think that most folk tales are just better told orally too. At the same time, it just adds that sense of creepiness to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You know, kind of the to go back to like Lovecraft. You know, it's that fear of the unknown. You know, most folk tales come from that fear we have to trying to explain the world, and this is what does it. This is malicious force, but if you do this, you won't fall to it. And you know, I've been going over folk tales a little bit in my class. Well, we were working on the novel Things Fall Apart. I don't know, have either one of you read that?
Uh,
Yes,
I am not.
Yeah, I
I
figured.
have.
I figured with being having your master's in English, you've definitely read it, Spence. Um, it's one of as you know, it's one of those just classics because one, it tells the point of view of Africa from
Mm-hmm.
the African perspective, and we get a lot of really good folk tales in it.
Oh yeah.
One, one I can think of is okay if I just launch into it, Hewitt.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, it's more free form.
Okay, the Abanje. So with the Abanje R is infant mortality rate was super high. And one of the main characters, Akwefe in the novel, keeps having children die. She had 9 of her 10 children have died, and what they believe, and which obviously plays on a really real fear of your children dying, is it's a spirit that keeps coming back and back just for the express purpose to die and cause the mother grief. So they do everything they can to prevent that, which includes mutilating the corpse of a baby. We went over that in class. You know, like how they just struggle with this horrible thing that happens, which leads them to do something horrible as well.
Or that kind of also feeds into like how you're supposed to dispose of a vampire, and you have to like literally dig up a family member and dismember them and then rebury them. To the point of like in some cases, I think you're supposed to burn the heart and drink the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
Shove a brick in their mouth and bury it separate from their body.
or place it underneath their buttocks. I mean, it's one of those things that it like. But sometimes the solution sounds more horrible than the actual problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, go on, Nate.
I was just going to say, it's such a horrible thing. It's going to lead you to do desperate people do desperate things.
100%. So, with that as an example right there, and what we said, we said, you know, it's got to have a grain of truth. It's got to play on a fear that's in the area, and it's passed down orally. That kind of hits very much the folk aspect that Spence kind of nailed with that on the oral tradition. But and this is like with some of the knowledge I have on this, because I'll be honest, I didn't look up any specific folk tale for this like other folks did, because I didn't know exactly what way we might try to take it. So my way, or what I want to do other than give examples tonight, is let's kind of just break down the elements of a folk tale that makes it work. These common things, like I think the like at the heart of every folk tale, there's also kind of a moral lesson. Similar to like most of the fairy tales that are out there, there's a moral lesson of what you need to learn from this, and you pass it down orally to everybody so that they'll remember it. And some of the terrible elements that might be in it is to really drive home that that point. Is that a fair assessment or statement?
I would say so. I mean that you have like Aesop's fables, and then that the I am blanking on the name right now. Right now that has that the I want to say that it is like that the African folk tales. I may be getting the name wrong, but I'm not going to basically say something. But basically, like everybody has read about that the tortoise and that the hare, that that the fox and the crane, that those type of stories do have that morality lesson at the end of it. But also for like just to kind of keep with just a little bit of that the spooky theme of it, sometimes that those folk sometimes folk tales are also warnings of like what not to do, where not to go, and such. I mean, especially with history has clearly shown that.
I absolutely agree, Spence. Just looking at, to use the example I used earlier, just because it's fresh on my mind, things fall apart. The forest is evil. They know it's not good. It's full of evil spirits. But in reality, it's full of dangerous wildlife. I pulled up in class and showed them how many deadly snakes live there, how many dangerous predators they have to worry about. And if you attribute this area to evil spirits, it's going to make it a lot easier than someone trying to be brave and fight like a physical animal.
Yeah, it's different between saying like there's a spirit out there that will steal your soul, and hey, uh, there's jaguars, or there are cheetahs. There's other big predatory animals. Because someone might be like, I can take a cheetah. Okay. On that note, my lovely wife on TikTok, someone asked your significant other, is there an apex predator they think they could fight? And the number of dudes that legit think they could fight a tiger or a bear is ridiculous. My answer to Emily was, I'm pretty sure I can take on a house cat because they are an apex predator. They have the highest kill ratio, and they kill for fun.
Say that until you're actually fighting one that really wants to take you out.
Yeah, it probably would win, because like it might want it more than me. Plus, like cats are what, 10 to 15 pounds of just pure hate sometimes.
Yeah, they can fuck you up, man.
Like I know that a friend of mine got bit between the thumb and the index finger by a house cat, and it bit right into the tendon that's in there. And they had to go have surgery because it tore it, so their thumb wouldn't work right. Like it's like that 1 in a million shot kind of things. But
well, not only that, it has bacteria all over the place. Cats' mouths are very dirty.
But I'm just saying, it's like someone might be like, "Oh, I think I can handle that. I can go out there." But I mean, and that's not. It's not even.
On my best day, I've never thought I could take on a tiger or a bear.
But here's the other thing: it's not just the apex predators or the big animals. Like, I mean, a water buffalo is not an apex predator, but I am never going to mess with what's known as the widowmaker, because they're the better part of a ton of just big, dumb, and very strong. But I mean, there's also plants out there. There's the chance that you will trip and fall and break something, and if you're in the middle of nowhere with a broken limb, you're kind of done. Or a mosquito bites you, and you get typhus, yellow fever, or something else like that. So
Malaria.
exactly. So I mean, there's all these things that could happen. I mean, the same thing in Europe. Like, don't go in the woods. Something's going to eat you. Don't go out. Don't
There
go.
is my favorite tale in France, um, where the wolves will just attack entire villages and completely depopulate them. Like from the Middle Ages. You were a Middle Ages historian.
Yeah, like people keep forgetting that. Like, there's like, why is there a big bad wolf? Why is the wolf so bad? Wolves aren't that thing. They're in zoos. I'm like, there were time periods where wolves actually ran and controlled parts of Paris, the largest city in Europe at that time. Like, it's like, don't go to that neighborhood. There's wolves.
They literally killed them all in the English Isles because they were so dangerous.
I mean,
There's no dangerous predators there anymore because they all got together and said, "Let's murder them."
and the thing is also like most people when they think of wolves, they think of like the dogs that look like wolves that we use in movies because they're trainable and they won't snap and possibly rip off an actor's finger. But a full-grown timber wolf, or if you get a full-grown gray wolf, they're almost at the shoulders at my hip. And I mean, I'm not stupid tall like you, Nathan, but that's still a rather large creature. 150 to 180 pound full-grown wolf.
Wolves is going to be a pack.
Yeah, there's not one. They're gonna velociraptor you. So I mean, it's one of those things of like, don't go out there. And the bad thing is like wolves, I think hit kind of a uncanny valley a little bit with humans as well, still because they look like a dog but they're not. But I mean, for the longest time, they were our biggest threat. Like, there's a reason that wolves and snakes still pop up throughout almost every, well, I guess every nation's folklore, because those are two of the creatures that for the longest time were a threat to us. And if you're not paying attention now, they still are. Because, humans love to prove that, natural selection still can get us every so often.
Yeah.
I got a question for y'all. Have y'all watched any folk horror movies like Hereditary, Antlers, Midsummer? The Ritual on Netflix is a great one where the terror doesn't really come from like slashers. It's like the suspense building. Do you think that's in a good folk tale? Is you need that suspense?
For a
I would,
movie, yeah, I would say that.
yeah, yeah, I would say that. And then just to correct myself from just like a earlier point, so that the internet don't yell at me, I was referring to the Asani tales, tales of that the Akan folktale character who is basically that the god of stories, wisdom, and knowledge and trickery, often depicted as a spider. So basically, that these are tales from West African and West Indian folklore. I just needed to just correct myself on that point.
Which is great stories too. It's a great thing. If you don't know anything about that, like Spence just said, they're great to look at. He's also a major character in American Gods and Anansi Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you read those?
I highly recommend the fully cast audiobook of American Gods. I could not force myself to actually read through American Gods because getting me to sit down is hard because I get fidgety. So the audiobook I really recommend because American Gods is wonderful.
I will have to look. I will. Now that I will have to give that a listen to. But to your point, Nate, about like those movies like like Midsummer and stuff like that. I just think that it is just that atmospheric horror versus just like that the slasher and stuff, even though that them in themselves could be basically folk tales. I mean that like that the movies Urban Legend and I know then I know what you did last summer that those can be loosely categorized as folk tales because in a sense that something comes back and does those things to those people that were involved.
Yeah, there's that the evil comes back and sets a rights a wrong. It's that old tale. It's also plays on that old tale, especially when I know what you did last summer of the guy with the hook hand and the people on a date.
Hmm.
So with Nate, and Spence, I think I'm not the biggest horror. Like I go back and I watch it now, stuff that I thought was scary when I was a kid, and I start laughing at it like any Freddy movie or anything like that. But horror, like a folk horror movie, I think you're not going to have the monster 90% of the time. Or if the monster shows up, it has to be at the end because very quickly it can switch to just another monster gore flick. The the uncertainty, the anxiety, the suspense, the everything's normal but it's not vibe is very much, I think, the point of a lot of those kind of folk horrors. And I mean, it probably sounds weird to say it this way. I also think things like Cabin in the Woods plays on this
Hmm.
trope. But even if you look at Evil Dead, the going out in the woods and then something happens to the kids, I think, kind of falls slightly into the folk horror aspect
Definitely.
because you're going out in the woods. I mean, now my thing is do it like my breakdown of like Cabin in the Woods. It's a really wonderful breakdown of absolutely everything in a horror genre.
Really, what Cabin in the Woods is just a dissection of all the tropes
Yeah.
It
in all
is.
in horror in the horror genre.
It is. The only thing that kills it for me is like the tail end of it, not like the actual ending. I kind of dig the actual ending, but there's a very large stint like in the towards the tail end that's there for the comedy aspect. And moments of it are great, but it's one of those you can't tell me you didn't have a protocol plan for this shit. And I mean, for the movie, it makes sense that they didn't, but that's kind of the thing that kind of killed it for me. Also, your brother Nate hyping it to be like the best thing ever, and then it didn't meet his description. It's a good movie. It just wasn't all that for me. But I think it's one that everybody that watches horror movies and wants to understand the tropes and kind of get the idea of some things should watch because
Yeah,
it's
especially like I know guys like Spence. You did a lot of critical theory, didn't you, in college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, if you like any kind of critical theory, literary theory, that's basically what it is. It's just like a essay on horror tropes, and they have a good time with it.
I mean that's just how like that the other movie of that similar vein called that the Belko Project or something with just at the office people and then that they were up in like a situation to where then that they were being like killed and stuff just like at that their job or whatever it's like something similar to Cabin of the Woods, but I do think that spoilers for just basically the basics of those movies and stuff, it is basically like a corporation is controlling it and basically kind of like putting just normal humans up in like underneath a microscope to see how would they react up in these situations. And then the thing about folk tales and stuff is sometimes that you can't be very scientific about it because it just happens.
I mean, and that's I'm going to say this something that makes a good folk horror story or a good folk tale to me is you never it's never fully explained. It's never it's never fully explained why this happens. It's just it has to happen.
Well, you should watch Hereditary, but I'll give you warning. It is one of the most terrifying movies I've ever watched. Like it's pretty brutal. Do it when you're in a good mood. If you have any like kind of depression or you're tired, don't watch it.
There's a whole list of movies like that and things on Netflix currently for me that's like when I'm in the mood or when I'm not holding, 10 pounds of baby at 1 or 2 in the morning. I don't need to watch something that kind of trips me up at that point.
You don't want to watch that movie with your baby. I'll just say that.
Well,
I have a big aversion because my imagination will run wild and I cannot deal with horror movies that I will basically like read the spoiler for it, but as far as watching it, I would just get too worked up.
it depends on the movie and it depends on who has recommended it to me. Like like if it's a gore film, I'm not, but if it's suspenseful, and I'll be honest, the faux horror genre kind of hits a lot of the right notes with me because, like we've already said, there's an other. There's like that other. There's that thing,
Hmm.
and something is not fully revealed. Everybody seems legit. Everybody seems fine, and then all of a sudden, the gong goes off and the bonfire is lit, and stuff just goes south quickly because everybody. It's like it's not a folk horror story, but like The Lottery. Y'all both read that. I think that was required reading back when we were all in high school, right?
I had never read The Lottery, but I can kind of get the gist of it.
But you know what I'm talking.
I've definitely read it. Yeah, Shirley Jackson. She did Haunting a Hill House. We've always lived in the castle. So it's always kind of pretty surreal. All her works are.
But I mean, like The Lottery, everything is normal, everything seems good until all of a sudden it's not, and yet when it's done, everybody seems to go back to what's normal. So I feel like that's one of the best elements of folk horror that you could really have is like there's no explanation. It's fine. It's fine. It's not fine. All of a sudden, it's fine again. And like I think that's what makes it even scarier at that moment is that it was just everybody's fine with it. Everything's normal. This was Tuesday, kind of a vibe.
Midsummer's kind of like that. Because at Midsummer, there's a cult, and like, and it's weird because it all takes place in the daylight. So you're not as
It takes away the darkness being an element that scares people.
pretty much.
But then that also, but then that that also heightens that effect too, because that whenever that we always hear these tales and stuff about folklore and stuff, we always picture it in that the daytime, and then that it just makes you just want to wonder or else not wonder what happens at night, because that it is basically like that. Just I had just that I had just got done listening to like that the Hound of Baskerville, and then that the small element about that this you are not supposed to go out to that the moors at night, or else that this giant Cujo dog will kill you and stuff, and then it's just like, huh, and then that it just made people go crazy. So I think that the aspects of folk tales and stuff are meant to make people go insane.
Now, Spence, you mentioned something a second ago. I'd kind of like to propose out there is like urban legends. Are urban legends just folk tales?
You see,
See, I
that
go ahead,
hmm,
Spence. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would say that it is a mix of like it is true, but it is also that the same way that a oral story has just its ramifications, as in like that the more that something is told, that the more it twists and turns into something bombastic, and then it just starts to get a little bit out there. That the more and more that it is told, so I would honestly think a urban legend can be that the modern day folktale.
I mean, I'm gonna say I lean heavily into that urban legends are folk tales. The only difference is where you set the location because they have a lot of the same elements. Minus like the ones we all heard growing up, and then the hook was left on the rear view mirror, or the hook was on the handle, kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times some of the urban legends lead into this, and they start for the exact same reasons. Like see, Spence, you're just younger than me and Nate, but you remember in the '90s, I would never accept popcorn balls, never accept an apple on Halloween because somebody put razor blades in it, or someone
Yeah,
put
I remember that.
someone injected poison into the candy, so you can't trust this certain candy.
Somebody's giving away their marijuana edibles.
Yeah.
Oh, right now the newest version of that same tale that keeps evolving and changing and being twisted around is
I
that there's
mean,
fentanyl laced candy now. So
that I kind of have experience in urban legend myself that I still don't know why we just saw elf that the letters ELF just spelled out in pigeon feathers up in just like that one of the other cities downtown area. Okay, so that we were basically kids about our early teens and stuff, and then that we were just like exploring that these abandoned buildings at the time and such, and then that we had basically stumbled across that this one building that had the letters ELF spelled out so perfectly up in feathers that you would think an artist or something did it, and then that we just got freaked out and that we had like went back came back with just like paintball gun, water gun, nerf a nerf gun or whatever, and then that we had went back there with flashlights and stuff, and then that we had heard something go, and then that my friend had shot a paintball gun up in the dark randomly, and then that we had heard something go oof, and we had drove the hell out of there, and still to this day we do not know what was in there or not.
Probably a homeless man.
But then that we just don't know. But what is that the significance of just that those letters elf spelled out like that though? But granted that that's just how like a folk tale would sort of happen, because that somebody could easily take this tale and make it be a little bit more uncanny and stuff. And then if any other movie directors and stuff are like listening to this, and then if they make this up into like a C or B slasher flick or whatever, please send royalties to us.
but I mean it with that, yeah. But I mean, like the big thing is like again, like I said, with urban legends, I feel most of them are cautionary. And there's still like the same thing, don't trust strangers, don't go places you're not supposed to. Uh and it's just the same vibes. And I feel like you could even like here another old horror movie. I almost feel like you could put Chud or any of the subterranean cannibalistic humanoid movies into kind of the same, like a very 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 edge of all this, because it's don't go down there, there's things that'll try to eat you.
Oh, like that the wrong turn movies. Ugh. Oh, those movies. Ugh.
Like the big thing is like, hey, the real reason you don't need to go into the sewer or play in drain pipes is one, there's gross human waste down there, and two,
Yeah.
if there's a flash flood somewhere, all of a sudden you're where the water is going to go and you can drown. But you tell a kid that, they're like, yeah, whatever. If you tell them, oh yeah, there's a troll down there that's going to eat you.
Yeah.
That one becomes a little bit more like, oh shit, dad don't lie about stuff, so there's a monster down there that'll eat you.
Yeah.
But I mean, then you got the other version of it, like there's alligators in the New York sewers, and that was only partially true. It's not because anybody flushed them, because a baby gator's too big to go down the pipe that way, but things that were
Right.
tossed out and made into the storm drains.
Right. And then that the movie Get Out basically was telling had did basically all of that the urban legends and tropes well, that like black people feared about what had happened and stuff. Like that the whole like lobotomy thing and stuff like that, that was a real folk tale that black people feared about, and stuff like that. So then that it is cautionary tales on all sides of every tracks and stuff. That that was just like one of just the most modern examples of like how like could it be a cautionary tale in a sense. Granted that that there are other things and stuff that still to this day that like that the dark web that you don't want to go there, that's why that the Guy Fawkes mask has been such a controversial costume piece nowadays because of the hacker group Anonymous. By the way, that we do not mess with Anonymous just like that the IRS, because then that they will mess you up.
They can find your info.
Mm-hmm.
But on that same note, because kind of leaning into that, do things like creepypasta and the SCP start falling into the category of a folktale?
I'd say some. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like that. It was that Slender Man incident to where that the girls tried to actually do it in real life up in that horrific situation, but it's like then that people just start to believe that kind of stuff.
But since you mentioned that one, Slenderman and the Rake, and I guess Siren Head now is the other big one. There's the number of people that think those stories have been around forever when Slenderman's 10 years old and from creepypasta.
I want to say,
Slender Man was started by something awful just to see if they could start something. We were curious, and it just took off. They were doing a folk horror, folk tale, urban legend contest on their forums.
mm-hmm.
Slender Man was one of the original entries.
So I mean that
But I
right there.
mean,
Go ahead,
go
Spence.
on. No,
Go
you go on.
go ahead.
Oh, that all that I was just going to just say that like that. Yeah, I mean that like the creepy pastas and stuff are just people just creating like that these scary stories and stuff just to basically just create more folk tales and such.
I mean, with this though, we can really break down because I guess Slenderman's like the big one, and like I said, we
Yeah.
could also break down the Rake about what elements of this modern creation start to hit folk tales. Like, what would make us think something like this creature or this entity had been around that long? And I think the first one is because it's not quite human, and that plays on everybody's fears. Like that massive uncanny valley, like because he's supposed to look human, but when you get close, or if he gets close enough to you, you realize the suit is not actually a suit; it's actually like pigmentation to the skin.
Mm-hmm. And then I think that the collecting pages aspect has that ritual aspect to it. Basically, like back up in ye olden times, that it's always some kind of ritual to just stop the entity or whatever of just said folktale.
Yeah.
And then also then that the warnings of like that what to do, what not to do, and stuff that that if that the modern day folktale has that those elements in it, I think that we can categorize it as a urban legend or folktale in that the modern era, especially with that the rules thing, because that you should not like look at this thing in the dark or whatever, like stuff like that.
But since we're saying or on this target, what would be the main difference between like that most people would make as the division between a folk tale and an urban legend at this point?
Well, urban legend probably comes from the name. It's like it probably depends where the story originated. Like obviously, or an urban legend would be like the man with the hook, because it kind of probably started in an urban environment as opposed to folk, which just has that more rural kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel to it. That's what I would think.
I'm on the same page with you there because folk
Same.
sounds ag and rural, while urban is urban. So,
Yeah.
but the thing
So
is,
let's talk about I'm sorry, Hewitt, you go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, like, they might hit the same notes, but like the landscape, I think, might be the main differentiation there. Just kind of the cement and agree with what people had said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say we could maybe look at one I know we probably all know pretty well. You know, the Native Americans had their folklore, the Wendigo.
Don't say that thing's name too many times.
Oh,
I mean,
I watched Antlers the other night, and which is what it's about. So it got me thinking about it. And what events do you think maybe led to that?
Well, if I remember right, a Wendy, which is what I usually like to call them, because I know you, if you say their names 3 times in a row, you're supposed to garner their attention. We're not in the right neck of the woods for that, because that's Algonquin and northern native.
The Minnesota's Great Lake region is
Yeah,
what I
their religious beliefs, but it's a spirit of hunger that takes over somebody, or sometimes, depending on the ordinance, might take over a dead body, and it is just all encompassing hunger and consumption.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because it is so well represented. Like, you know, the image with the deer skull or just the cervine skull in general. We see that a lot around now. It's
But
on SCP. They have the Wendigo skull.
no,
That's go ahead.
I was going to say the big thing though is the way that what most of us envision as a Wendy uh, is not the way they were initially depicted. It's kind of an adaptation of a Skinwalker or a Nagloshi. A lot of times with how we look at it with the current form, because it's scarier. Like there's an old movie. I'm trying to remember. I think Christian Bale might have been in it. Uh, and God, now I can't remember the actor's name. He was in Minority Report and Band of Brothers. Tall blonde guy with real bright blonde hair. Uh, but it was soldiers, and they were out in the they were out on the edge. They were out on the frontier, and people kept dying. It was because of a Wendy. And eventually, it was just they had a cannibal there, and he just was extremely powerful and extremely strong because he had eaten so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things like we think about it, but we don't think about how it's like from what I've read. It's about like famine, coldness, starvation. Yeah, it's
And
described by the Algonquins as this. A giant with a heart of ice. Sometimes it's thought to be made entirely of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed with missing lips and toes. And there's another description of it, the Abajwe. I don't know if I said that right. I'm sure I didn't. I apologize. It was a large creature, tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was a strange hiss, its footprints full of blood, and it ate any man, woman, or child who ventured into its territory. And those were the lucky ones. Sometimes the Wendigo chose to possess a person instead, and luckless individual became one himself, hunting down those he had loved and feasting upon their flesh.
that sounds like basically what uh that the video game that does the whole like basically active time events that they had did the Until Dawn game, to where then that they basically had that these teenagers had to go up against a Wendy, and then that one of the endings show like one of the characters actually like becoming one, and then it's just basically, I think then that is what that game had based their version of it off of.
but the thing is, the fear of that creature is so real that we have an actual
Actual
medical
medical
condition named
condition
after it.
named after it.
We do, and not only that, you got to think about the European legends that are similar.
The
Well, really,
Strigoi.
when I read this, it was ghouls. You know, like people who come alive and eat the dead.
A ghoul, also a Strigoi, like the coming back to attack the family members specifically, like that kind of stuff. it's a universal note that we worry about. But I know that like there's actual this is one of the weird things with like it's a folklore creature and part of the native religions, but like we have actual cases where people got put on trial and got accused of being this in Canada because during extremely harsh winters, all of a sudden, like only one member of a family was left in the house, and there had been 4 or 5 before the winter happened.
Oh,
Like,
wow. Go ahead.
I'm trying to remember the exact case. I can't remember the names, but the father of the family had snapped. He was known to be an alcoholic, and completely snapped and killed and ate his entire family. And he had survived the winter that way. And when he was found the next winter, and they found the remains buried in the back, and that the bones had been cracked for marrow, he was hung. And
Yeah.
he was found
Go ahead.
guilty. He was found guilty of being a Wendy. So that's one of those things of how creepy that thing is.
Yeah. Well, I saw a photo. I meant to save it so I could share it with y'all. But it's when they found the guys, the Uruguayan soccer team they found in the Andes.
Uh-huh.
They crashed in the mountains and they had to eat each other, and like it was just him sitting there smoking his pipe, but like at his feet was a spine, no ribs. Like it was just ugh. I don't know.
I mean, again, it hits that note we mentioned earlier of everything's fine, but it's not. Something's slightly off. And in an absolutely terrifying way, it makes it scarier is everybody acts like it's normal.
Well, the photographer definitely had to act like it was normal because he was staying with them. He didn't realize they had cannibalized some people. So he had to stay there all night, not knowing what would happen to him. But you know, I mean, I think it's just like we don't want to attribute that anybody's capable of something so terrible. You know what I mean? I think when it comes to folk tales like this, we don't ever want to think that if we're in that desperate situation, we might result in the same thing.
I mean that to kind of keep it more up and grounded, up in like reality a bit, and then hate to get morbid with it, but you know that the famous serial killers, you know, like Ed Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, like folks like that basically did all of these terrible things, and then that you know that that it was just hearsay until that they were finally caught. And even like robbers and stuff making all of these vast escapes and stuff with just money and stuff like that, you know, that somebody had buried the suitcase of $1 million and nobody know where it is and stuff, you know, how
Kind of
much
like
of that we know.
That is a classic trope. I literally just read the book Finders Keepers, Stephen King. It has that trope in it. And one of my favorite movies of all time, Fargo. That's a trope. They bury the money. They murder each other over it.
well, also it's kind of like the whole thing with DB Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Which I would definitely say is an American folktale now, 100%.
Yeah, it is moved away from what really happened into a realm of fantasy, like to the point that they even made jokes about it on the first season of Loki by Disney. Like, I don't think that's a spoiler at this point since the show's been out for a while, but there's like the whole DB Cooper thing was
Yeah, you just
was
reminded me on Supernatural. They had DB Cooper get eaten by a Wendy. They went looking for him. I forgot about that.
so I
I
mean
mean,
it's
it is to the point that they have Bigfoot doing just like his own business on like that these commercials and stuff, but yet that nobody knows where he is.
I know where
Like,
Bigfoot is. Once a week he gets on YouTube and he plays the saxophone. Hashtag watch
yeah,
sax squatch.
I mean that, but yeah, I mean it's just basically for us, you know, all of these folk tales and stuff, especially whenever that we are running like like our spooky games and stuff like that, we always dig deep up into these tropes and such to kind of like throw off our players' expectations and try to, trip them up, especially with Monster of the Week, that you, Miro, that you do a very good job of just like exceeding our expectations all the time. You subvert the tropes.
I appreciate the compliment on that. I was
It
going
could
to say,
just be like that. I'm a troll. I'm just here getting my underwear. I don't know why I did that. I just wanted clean laundry. It'll be something like that, and it's like, wait, huh?
well, to be fair, the troll trying to being angry about getting underwear is probably a serious thing because I don't think they make 10x undies all that much.
Not with that attitude. We got a sewing machine.
But like all the End of the Woods so far have had one continuous thing, ranging from the first one I ran to last October when NASA ran,
Strahd.
Strahd, is the folk horror aspect of everything's normal, and then all of a sudden it's not like the village of Ash that I sent y'all to seemed friendly until you realized why there were a whole lot of unattended children, as the adults had all there are several adults that were being sacrificed in the Burning Man figure. And then
Mm-hmm.
Grave did that. Topher, every like his whole thing was running on folk horror, especially Eastern European folk horror, which is terrifying. Uh,
Yeah.
and then NASA, we sat down and ate dinner with Strahd. So like, and in Bosch's game, it was a village full of ghouls at night, but normal by day. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's just that's a trope that we can rely on, and it's very much an other thing. And also, all of us who live in cities, even though
Mm-hmm.
we're in a very rural section, is it's kind of it's a long running trope of a distrust of the folks who live out in the sticks, the rural people, or by the original definition of the word pagan, the people who live out in the country, out in the woods. They do something different than you. And so
Mm-hmm.
it should, since they're different, they should be feared, is like one of the running tropes in a lot of this stuff.
Right. Right. I mean, it's just, with just that, whenever that you have to basically use all of these, that, especially for spooky games, creating just like that, just like that, those, oh, what does Christopher Vogler calls it? Like that, the guide, that these, guiding characters that serve as, warnings about like, young travelers, do not go here or else that you will get got, essentially. Or else brave ones, you must do this or whatever. And then it's whenever that the players are faced with with just that the legend face on, it is like, what do we do in this situation? We don't want to show all of our cards and stuff, but we also don't want the folk to come true.
That's
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Tropes are tropes for a reason. Just because they've been done before doesn't mean they can't be done well again.
no, that's a good point, because like I've tried to avoid tropes a lot, but Nate, when you said that to me the first time, I was like, that's a good point. Just don't rely on the bad version of the trope that you've been taught or seen. Try to actually tweak it a little bit, make it fresh. Like
Right.
if it's still around, because there's tropes that have been around since humans first started telling stories. A lot of them have definitely been around since Shakespeare decided to make his first inappropriate joke thinly veiled in his scripts.
Yeah, I
So,
mean that. Right. Mm-hmm. Go on.
oh, I was going to say, if there's nothing else on this point, I actually had an exercise idea we could work on before we finish this up with y'all telling stories if you wanted to. Is
All that like right before that the exercise, I was just gonna say that that Beowulf is really the first superhero tale.
that's true,
Yeah, I've heard that before, for sure.
but let's see. Let's take the elements, and I guess this is similar to what they did with Slenderman. Is what elements to the three of us would be necessary to start off a good folk tale, like what time of year does it need to happen?
Hmm.
I'm always partial to like the end of the year, like fall or
I'd
I'd
say
winter,
say
fall.
fall.
just because it's it gets dark easier. There's more dark hours out, just that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we already have a connotation with autumn and fall about it being a spookier time. Like it's nothing about October is scary compared to just November a month later. It's just that we celebrate Halloween this month. We have all Hallows Eve and All Saints Day
Yeah.
or Samhain or Samhain for folks that celebrate that. It's not necessarily scary, but we try to make it that way because there's the whole connotation of being connected to the dead and the end of the season, and this is when you slaughter, this is when you harvest. And like Nate said, this is when it gets dark and it gets cold. What time of day is the best for a good folk tale?
I would say twilight because that it is just like right before that twilight or at the twilight or dusk because it just sets the mood at the sun is setting and then that it is kind of like that are you afraid of the dark mentality but not to that the point to where that the whatever of the folk tale is already outstanding standing like right behind you. It is just basically giving that forewarning like like to set up to just set up that mood because you will always have that one jumpy individual that will have that overactive imagination that will start to see the sad thing out of just everything.
Yeah, like that golden hour. I know what you mean. You need to be getting home and you got stuff to do. You're tired, so you may not be thinking straight.
I'm I'm kind of torn between either during the day, so if all of a sudden it gets dark, or all of a sudden something happens to the light, it makes it spookier because this is not normal for that time of day, or the witching hour. Like you are not supposed to be up this late. You are not supposed to be doing anything at this time, and everything they told you is going to go wrong is. So like I'm kind of torn between those two being a really good point for when something like if it's at the witching hour, if it's really late, that works because this is you were not supposed to do this and now you've seen something you can't unsee. Or it's during the day and something very bad is about to happen, like as a foreshadow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like maybe if it's something that happens continuously, like the monster visits the child trope,
Right.
Right.
like you said, like at the witching hour. I think that makes a good good story depending how it's done.
Yeah.
And then what would be like what makes a good folk entity? Like I won't say monster, like what makes a good folk entity? My first thing I'm going to say is it's not quite human, but it's not human.
I think yeah, it needs to have that appearance maybe, but it needs to be like beyond your understanding, like clearly otherworldly,
Right.
maybe.
Right.
Right, like that your Doulahan, that your Green Knights, like just like the Boogeyman. That is basically like that. Nobody truly knows what a Boogeyman or Slender Man is. It is just right on the cusp of like, is it human? I don't want to get close to it to find out if it's not. But just something like that in a sense.
Well, it's kind of like a red cap with me. Like a red cap looks human. And then you realize why its cap's red and it's smart enough and it's human enough that it even knows how to mimic us enough to do what it needs to do or what it wants to do. Like
I
if
mean,
that
that's just like Kitsune, that they are just trickster and just shapeshifters is a 100% must for this entity.
Or like the Kelpie, it looks like a horse until you get on its back, and then it drags you out to the water and drowns you so it can eat you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think it also takes the form of like Scottish hot boy summer, that when you go to hug it, it does the same thing. I can't remember if that's a different. That's probably a different creature.
You just reminded me. I read a great folk horror novel not that long ago, and it's called The Haar, Haar, and basically this old woman finds a sea monster and brings it back to her house, and like they, I don't know how to put it, but it's like the goriest love story I've ever read. It's
So,
super weird.
Does she like bring victims back to it?
Sort of, yeah, but it goes into, it takes the shape of her husband, the shape of her as a teenager, and they get her and the monster would get connected, and ultimately, I don't know, I don't want to spoil it.
so that the Shape of Water mixed in with Lake Placid. Gotcha.
Well, I mean, I think we can figure out where that story is going to go. That she eventually becomes its victim.
You would think, but no.
Oh, okay. I kind of dig that.
You just gotta yeah, he's a David Saunderson. He's a Scottish writer, and that's what reminded me of it, and it just stuck with me. I read a lot. I read a lot of horror. I just enjoy it. I don't really. It's like something you can control. If I'm getting too emotional on something, if something hits me wrong, I can just put it down. Not like real life. It makes me feel like I'm getting away from it.
Right. I kind of did that for a while with preparing for the Dresden game, which we haven't played in a minute. But the main thing I keep throwing at them is Fae. Because to me, the scariest movie monster, scariest folklore monster, horror monster are the Fae. They're just close enough to being human. And they are intelligent. It's not just necessarily a creature driven by instinct. They've made the choice to do this a lot of times. And then
they're trying to trick you. Like, they have plans within plans. They're so inhuman you can't understand what they're doing.
Like, never accept food from them. If they ever say, "May I have your name?" kind of thing. Those type of things, to where, like, if you like, I've thrown this trope out so many times because I know none of my party's going to fall for it. Is a Fae asks, "May I have your name?" And nobody says anything. But think about that, like that otherworldly aspect that would come into effect of someone actually gives the Fae their name, and now they don't have one. They never had one. They were never given. It literally changes it's not natural, and it's a power beyond understanding for most people that could drive someone mad all of a sudden to learn that their entire timeline got changed to the point that something that might be in their head shouldn't be in their head. And that's something I played with in the Dresden game, is that they've messed with time magic. They've messed with entities that don't follow linear time like we do. And it results in them sporadically taking harm if they try to recall the old timeline or things that they've done in previous games before that certain event, because that memory's still kind of in there, but it shouldn't be. So all of a sudden it triggers like a migraine.
That is a very good concept to use, actually, to basically, you still let that player take that risk of basically doing, to basically remember that their original character name, but in a sense, instead of just writing it off as just like that the Fae had basically changed your whole name, that it is still that residual memory there, but you know that that's not it. That's a really good idea. And also that a player at our shop campaign actually failed for that. That we were basically up in at the Feywild looking for one of the shard pieces, and basically that our fighter basically had gave a water Fey his name. His name had changed to his last name, and we all just started calling him by his last name for like the rest of the campaign, because the DM was just like, well, that your new name is this now. that that there was no more Stelios. It was just only Sir Dynasty, and that was a proud and good moment.
Yeah, it's always fun to include things like that. I pulling in real life folklore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, since we've kind of done this breakdown for everything, is there a folk tale that either one of you would really like to tell before we sign off tonight?
I had already told about just it was just I wouldn't even really call it I wouldn't really call that one a folk tale, but I do have a I do have a personal one that had kind of that is kind of like a urban legend more so, but up in just at the neighborhood I grew up in, that there was this place called Dog Alley. It was like at this about a half a mile stretch in just at the neighborhood. The kids say, "Do not that don't go down there. That you will get bit by just these big ravenous dogs," because that kids were used to basically take the challenge of just running as fast as they can down at this big ass stretch of like in between road and stuff, and then that there's like trees and stuff that are like covering up the sky. So even if it is like sunny outside, it still has that pocket those pockets of light and shadow. But one kid, he had thought that he was smart because somebody had dared him to do it at night, and the kid ended up in the hospital, apparently. That this is all hearsay because one of his friends came back and said, like, "Oh man, Tyrone, he got bit hard." And then that apparently that these dogs had got to this kid whenever that he had tripped and fell over like that this tree branch that he swear that wasn't there because that there was a bunch of old trees and stuff that grew there. So he basically tripped and fell, and then that you can at sometimes at night you can even hear the howls of that these dogs howl and stuff, especially if that you had lived in that area. And to this day, that you know, that I still just like look at that area and be like that. I remember making the run once as a kid, but I was very, very lucky because as soon as I made it out to safety, I could swear I could hear like chains and stuff rattling like right on the cusp of me, as in like a dog or something had got caught by a choker.
Ouch.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I could tell a little short folk tale here I got of like Native American. I did some research. I was going to talk about the Night Riders, but the Night Riders were a real thing, and I didn't know if we wanted to go to like history.
Right.
Right.
But here's the we can do like horrible history one time if y'all want. That's fine. But this is the Death Trail. It's a Choctaw uh, folktale. After a man dies, he must travel far on the death trail. It journeys into the darkening land where the sun slips over in the edge of the plain earth. Then the spirit comes to a deep, rapid stream, and there are steep and rugged hills on each side, so that one may not follow a land trail. The trail of the dead leads over the stream, and the only bridge is a log pine. It is a very slippery log, and even the bark has been peeled off. Also on the other side of the bridge are six persons. They have rocks in their hands, and they throw them at spirits when they are just at the middle of the log. Now, when an evil spirit sees the stones coming, he tries to dodge them. Therefore, he slips off the log. He falls into the water below where are evil things. The water carries him around and around in a whirlpool, then brings him back among the evil things. Sometimes an evil spirit climbs up on the rocks and looks over the country of good spirits, but he cannot go there. Now the good spirit walks over safely. He does not mind the stones, it does not dodge them. He crosses the stream and goes to good hunting land. It is more beautiful than the one on Earth Plain. There are no storms, the sky is always blue, the grass is green, and there are many buffalo. Therefore, there is always feasting and dancing. I don't know. It was just I had never heard you know, what they thought the afterlife might look like. I didn't really ever think about it, and it just reminded me a lot of the Greeks. It just seems like some things are just universal, or feasting forever, Valhalla.
Right. So I mean, like I say, there's a lot of things like that there's that universal vibe to. Like it's one of those where like everybody's created a dragon of some form in their mythologies, and there's always like the land of plenty that you can go to if you've been good when you pass away, by whatever that society's version of good might be. I didn't, like I said, I didn't look up because most of the stuff I've said is when we were still doing investigation check. I kind of threw out the ones I was super into or really know much about, and I get to keep using this excuse for a little bit. Having a newborn really cuts into research time. But I guess kind of connected to this would be like Chris, if he had jumped in tonight, he probably would have talked to us about the Rougarou. Because there's so much stuff like it can't count past 12. So if you put 13 pennies down, it can't get in your house, kind of thing. Or if you, like for vampires, you throw rice down and they got to count each grain. But that only seems for the ones with OCD.
Hey, you got to come up with some weaknesses for your horrible monster.
I really love the ones that are super ridiculous.
Me too. They're the ones I found are really just like creation and that kind of thing. The only real horror thing I found on for natives was the Windy.
I mean, there's another one of these we could completely. I mean, at some point, Chris and I are also still working on a podcast. He's doing a really good job editing, but eventually we're going to have to touch on. Oh, sorry, I'm getting weird feedback. Hello. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was getting a weird feedback. It's we'll eventually touch on the pumpkin spice of cryptids right now, and that is the skinwalker. And I say that with all disdain, even though I know that if that creature is real or that type of person is real, it's not a smart idea to mess with them or taunt them. But everything's a skinwalker now. I mean, it's like, oh, skinwalker season started at Starbucks kind of thing. That's why I call them the pumpkin spice right now. Then again, Bigfoot's the peppermint latte, so.
He's the classic. You can always go back to.
I personally, I would love Bigfoot to be real, personally, just because that would make the world seem a little like, if we discover he's real, all of a sudden Bigfoot, or find that big feet are real, new species, we've discovered them, we've thought about them forever. That's cool, awesome. The world's a little bit more magical / not magical now, because we went from this thing not being possibly being real to now it is real. So that's kind of cool. But at the same time, I always want to hold out hope for something like that, because it makes the world seem less of what it has been right now for a very long time. Bigfoot gives me hope.
Less magical.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. All right, guys. I need to think about getting to bed, but it was fun.
Yeah, this was great.
I'll try to do it in the next one too. Try to be better about participating.
Cool. I know the next one will actually be at Extra Life. Your brother's going to be in charge of that, and we're going to be doing it live from the Extra Life set over at Bosch's. So
I might already have that set up, but if not, I'll hop in.
Oh, cool. It's for everybody to show up to. It's not just. It's just.
Yeah, I figured that. I didn't think. I was just saying. I didn't know. Like.
Yeah.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. I'll just message Chris. No
cool.
big deal.
So since we're about to sign off for the folks that are watching us, thank you for tuning in. You can find more information about us on Facebook, here on Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Threads as Team Bonus Action, or go to our website, teambonusaction.com. You can also find us on the app formerly known as Twitter, as bonus_team. And we'll be back tomorrow with Holy Winds, and we will be back Thursday with our first live in-person game since my beautiful daughter was born, with Ninja Spence running our next wave of Into the Woods. And I think maybe Saturday we might be doing something, Nate.
Sure. Maybe. Yeah, on the lady afterwards, if you I'll message y'all tomorrow on my break, and we'll set that up.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
Also, we need to finish Marigold. We just got to get a hold of Topher and
I know,
Bosch.
man. It won't take but like 20 seconds. Like y'all overcame the threat a lot quicker than and more creatively than I thought you would. But it was fun.
It was. So that's what we got going on. And folks, since Knox is not here, don't let your meatloaf.
We killed that.
Yeah, we did really good on that one. Thank you for tuning in to another Bonus Roundtable podcast brought to you by Team Bonus Action. If you'd like to find more out about us, you can go to our website at teambonusaction.com, or you can check us out on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube as Team Bonus Action, or on Twitter at bonus_team. And since Knox is not here, don't let your meatloaf.